Hey everybody! We've looked at an overview of how natural selection works, but now we're going to think about how do new species actually evolve over time because of natural selection. And we know that originally the first life started as one single species. The most simple single-celled organisms were the very first species that lived on Earth, probably about 4.2 billion years ago. And over evolution, over millions and billions of years of natural selection working, we know that we've reached our millions of species that have lived on Earth and that still live today. So the question is, how do new species actually evolve? Well, we're going to look at it really simply to start us off. I've got another acronym for us to remember, and this one is INRS. I guess you can say it's INRS. So INRS, it stands for isolation, then natural selection, let's work down. Isolation, natural selection, a reproductive barrier, and then that causes speciation, which is basically a new species evolving. So that's the final step. Okay. So isolation, well, let's start off with our population. Let's say we've got an imaginary species here. Little green circles is a population of our species. The first thing that has to happen for a new species to evolve is the species is part of the population has to be isolated from the rest. So a really easy example of this would be a river. Maybe a river floods and it separates two halves of the population. So now they're isolated. So that's step one. Then natural selection is going to happen and affect the two different populations now because they can't breed with each other anymore. They're isolated. So natural selection will happen and it will cause changes on the two populations. And if enough changes happen, then there'll be a reproductive barrier. So those populations can no longer interbreed with each other, even if they were able to cross the river. And then the last thing, obviously, if the two populations can't breed with each other anymore, then they've become a new species. So we would say that the species over here has become a new one, and now we've got our yellow species, where they used to be green. So speciation happens with isolation, natural selection, a reproductive barrier forms, and that causes speciation. So INRS.